folks, Colin Bunyan back again, and yes, the chef's hat is back as requested. I'm going to show you how you make the ultimate in English classic, the steak and ale pie. Because a lot of places they wreck it with mushrooms, kidney, garlic and all sorts of other stuff. So I'm going to run you through the ingredients and then we'll get started. You're going to need some beef. I've used a skirt of beef. You can use chuck if you want, or some flank. Don't get a steak, you're not going to need it. Some ready-made shortcrust pastry. I say ready-made, I homemade the pastry. I advise you to do the same because ready-made pastry tastes like rubber. Some beef stock, some cayenne pepper, some black pepper, some plain flour, some salt, some eggs for the egg wash, and the star of the show, a nice bottle of real ale. That is going to be where you get the nice smell. Alright, first step to do is grab some olive oil or some lard, and then we're going to fry the beef off gently. Do it in batches, don't bother crowding the pan, because otherwise you'll end up sweating the beef, and you don't want to be sweating it. Do it in small batches, leave space in the pan. There we are, that's what the beef should look like. You've got nice charring on the beef, very well done all around. I'm just frying the last of the beef. Right, now as you can see here, you've got plenty of fond, you've got plenty of the black bits there. That's all juice from the beef. You don't want to lose that. So I'm going to deglaze it with about 150ml to 200ml of real ale. I'm using Old Speckled Hen, it's a good cooker. Bombardier, there's a whole host of good ales you can use to cook, but make sure it's a dark ale. Grab your spoon or your spatula and just run along the bottom. Keep the heat on, because that way it'll thicken slightly. Now you notice all the stuff's coming up from the bottom of the pan. I'm going to turn the heat down to low. What I'm now going to do is I'm now going to add just a hint of butter, okay? Probably about a tablespoon or so of butter, that much or so. We've done loads of these sauces before. Just place the butter in, and then, within reason, just shake the butter around just to melt it. Now, what I'm going to do, just very quickly, I'm going to grab some pepper and some cayenne. Now, when they say keep shaking it, within reason, I'm going to grab some black pepper, crack that in. A little hint of cayenne, you don't need much, this stuff is potent. That'll do, it's quite nice. And then just swirl it around, swirl it around. The butter will thicken the sauce. If you're doing it in a frying pan, you've got to be a bit careful because the shallow depth means you might splash yourself, so just be a bit careful. And the butter is just about gone now. And you see how thick this is now? As a consistency, it's just thickened up nicely. Now I'm going to quickly add about a tablespoon of flour, and then very quickly stir that in. What this does is this thickens up as well, should dissolve in the sauce, and you'll end up with a nice roux. And then all we do is we pour the beef back in to the sauce, very carefully, you don't want to splash yourself, and the gravy should just about come up to the top. With a quick stir. Okay, now that needs to sit at a simmering level for about 1 hour. Right, I'm now going to deal with the pastry for the pie. Flour the surface and make sure it's fairly generous. Make sure your hands are floured as well. Flour the rolling pin. Take your pastry, the amount will be on the blog below, and you want to split this 60-40. You don't want to go exactly half and half, because one side is going to be used for the lid, the other side has to be used for the base and the sides, and the base and the sides needs a little more. You start by pressing out the pastry a little bit, just to give it a bit of a head start. Coat it with flour, roll out the pastry. You want this to be fairly thin without going OTT, because this is going to have to support a fair amount of steak, fair amount of gravy, so you don't want this to be too thin. That is the pastry for the pie. The crust, I've got 30% left for the lid. I'm hoping that will be enough to roll out to form a lid. I initially said 60-40, hasn't quite worked out the way I wanted it to. So, I'm going to roll this out. The beef filling, by the way, that is cooked. I'm just letting that cool down a little bit. You don't want that to go in totally hot to the pie. Okay, you want it to be warm, but you don't want it to be scalding hot. So press the pastry down, both sides. Well, roll it out and hopefully there will be enough. That's the pastry. I'm now going to carefully fill this with the stewed meat, okay? Now let it cool just for a few minutes. I don't want it to get too cold, okay? And it comes up to about halfway, maybe a bit more than that, 2/3. Get as much of the gravy as you can, because believe me, that's going to cook, it's going to be rich, it's going to be fantastic. Now for possibly the trickiest part, okay? I've cut a square out of the lid, partially for ventilation, but partially because frankly I get the funny feeling I'm going to need all the pastry I can get, and that is to try to lay lid on the pie. Crimp it, crimp it, crimp it, crimp it wherever I can, okay? And just tear off and improvise where you can. If you have a little bit left in the corners, that could just be used for ventilation purposes. That is what the pie looks like. Now the four corners are going to bubble over because there's not quite enough pastry, but that doesn't matter. They'll serve as vents to prevent the pie from exploding. That goes into the oven, or gas mark 5, for about 35 to 40 minutes. I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what you call a steak and ale pie. That's been in for 45 minutes. You've got a little bit of egg wash on the top just to make the pastry nice and risen up, but that's going to be served, and that will serve 8 people. I can smell it from here, so I'm going to tuck in. Thank you very much. Good night.